Hi, I'm Steve Smith, and I'm a results leader.
You're listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Being a thought leader is easy. Getting results is hard. This show is for the results leader who lives and dies by their results. Here is your host and Chief Results Leader, Jonathan Rivera.
It is time once again for ResultsLeader.fm. Welcome back. Glad that you're here. And now I am going to fill your earbuds with some amazing information. Got a guest today who will share some insights on how to be an extraordinary leader, how to be a savvy business owner, and most importantly, how to be confident. Today's guest is Mr. Steve Smith from Growth Source Coaching. Let's jump in. Steve, welcome to the show. Good to have you. Are you ready to do this?
I am ready to do it, and thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here, and let's give our listeners a really quick win. What book have you given most as a gift?
Well, the book that I've given out to folks, and today probably a little over 200, has actually been a book that I wrote, and it was called Leadership Axioms. It's a very short book, but it's one that I've given out quite frequently. The one I've recommended the most is not anything I wrote. It's one called Convince Them in 90 Seconds by Nicholas Boothman. It's a fabulous book on how to make great instant connections in business. And there's been a lot of clients and colleagues that I thought could benefit. So I've told them, hey, go buy this book.
There you go. You can see what kind of guy he is. He gave us 2, so we're already winning. Thank you, Steve. So let's talk about failure, man. Can you tell us a story of how an apparent failure set you up for later success?
Yes. When I left my corporate career in 2008, I wasn't sure what I was going to get into, but I was guided towards the field of business coaching. And I ran into a very young startup franchise organization that I fell in love with, and I bought into them and became part of them. And unfortunately, in the world of franchising, they were not around long enough to sustain longevity. And 2.5 years after I got into it, they went bankrupt. And what do you do with a franchise when the mothership goes down? I mean, you basically don't have anything of value other than the content and the things that you've derived, along the way. So I took that and I repurposed it, rebranded it, kind of made it my own. And that was the springboard for what I have today. And I could not have gotten to where I am today if I hadn't gone through that.
What would you say is the most worthwhile investment you've ever made?
Most worthwhile investment I've ever made. Oh boy, this goes back a ways. When I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to be in business, but I was a little unsure about what that looked like. And I ended up, through frustration of trying to get connected with quality companies, I ran into a recruiter. And the recruiter kind of tuned me up and put me in front of the right companies. And he said, oh, by the way, the companies that I work with are all, you have to pay a fee, and I don't pay those fees. The people I place pay those fees. So you got to decide up front whether you're going to do that or not. So begrudgingly, I made the decision to do that. And of course, for me, it was a third of my annual salary first year out. And I had to pay that up front. I couldn't pay that in installments. So I decided to pay up, Best investment I ever made. It got me into an industry that propelled me for the growth and the success that I had over that next 30 years. Never would have seen it coming up front, but I'm glad I decided to do it.
Now, I want to just unpack a little bit of what you said there. You went to college, you wanted to be in business, but it didn't really prepare you. So then what did you take away from the college experience?
College experience was a combination of figuring out how to basically live on your own. I mean, you had to make decisions. You had to be able to eat and pay for things and do stuff without anybody looking over you saying, oh, do this and don't do that. And so it was that. It was getting an education. For me, it was a big part of it was sports. I actually got a football scholarship from high school into college, which helped defray a lot of the costs and stuff. But, when I got out, what I basically knew, I was ready to get involved in a professional way. What I didn't really know was what industry or what business it would look like. So I think it prepared me a lot just being independent in life, which to me, that was a huge return on my investment.
In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Okay, this one really caused me to have to sit back and think about this. Years and years ago, I was somewhat famous for doling out advice.
Famous? What's that mean?
Well, it means that people kind of knew that if they came to me and kind of relayed any kind of a situation that they were going through, whether they asked for the advice or not, I was going to give it to them. And I wish going back, I had that perception and could kind of dial that back, but I didn't. Well, when I got into the coaching business and started realizing the dynamics of helping other people come up with their own solutions, that changed everything for me, because I went from just telling people the answer to just listening and helping direct them in a way that the answer would come up. And guess what? They like me more for it. People don't want to know my solution. They want me to help them come up with their solution. And that was a major change. And quite honestly, a bad habit that I'm glad I got rid of.
How'd you figure it out?
I read a couple of books along the way that really talked about the power of listening. And interestingly enough, they weren't books that were titled that. In fact, one of the best ones was actually a sales book, and it's called Spin Selling. It's been around forever. It was written back in 1986 by Neil Rackham. But if you read how that book goes and how to handle consultative selling, it's just totally baked with listening and asking questions and guiding people to a logical conclusion without giving them the answer. And so through reading various books like that along the way, and of course, working with other coaches who had been in the business a lot longer than me, it finally came to, it was like one of these light bulb moments where it's like, oh my God, don't say anything. Just keep the conversation going. Eventually they'll get to where they need to go. And it works really well.
Like magic. What would you say are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
One of the tried and true kind of disciplines of being in coaching is that you never give the client any advice or consultation or recommendations or help them get to where they want. They're supposed to go there themselves, and you're supposed to kind of ask questions to help guide them along the way. And as I just said, I totally believe in that. But when you're dealing with business people that have owned businesses and they're getting into areas that are totally uncharted for them, sometimes you have to break that cycle and say, here's some options to think about. Let's talk about each one of these and figure out which one might be the best fit for you. So you are kind of leading them and giving them things to think about, recommendations, observations, things that they can put their arms around. So I've totally kind of gotten away from that real hard, discipline of never give them the answer, because sometimes they need it to get the action going. And for me, it's all about the action. I mean, you can learn a ton of stuff and never do anything with it. And that's not what I'm about. I'm there to tee them up so they're in position to actually take action on what they now know is the right path for them.
Let's talk about results. Why do results matter?
Results matter because if you know what you want and you've got it clear in your head as to what it looks like, getting those results is an affirmation that you are on the right path, that you are doing most things right, that builds confidence. It builds clarity. It allows people to move forward. The bigger question is, what kind of results do you want? Many people say, I need results, but they don't quantify it. They don't actually get close to what that looks like. So any outcome you get, good or bad, is a result, but most of the time without that clarification about what that result actually needs to be, they usually come up with something they didn't anticipate. Sometimes it's good. A lot of times it isn't.
You said, if you know what you want, and I've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it. People do not know what they want. And that's why I think a lot of people are unhappy. So how do you help people figure out what they want so they can get clear on how to get there?
Yeah, that's a good observation, because you're right. Most people can't articulate what they want, but I'll tell you what they all can articulate is what they don't want. A lot of people are really clear about what hole they stepped in that they don't want to ever go back to. And so sometimes it's just a matter of just saying, okay, let's talk about all the things you don't want to have happen. And then you kind of look at, okay, what's the opposite to that? What one thing could show up that could not only make you a superstar and feel really great about what you do and have all the people around you recognize you as a top-notch business person, but not go back into that cave of darkness, And so sometimes it's just a matter of just changing up the question and say, look, let's talk about what you don't want to have show up. And sometimes the process of elimination, it gets to things they can think about I actually had that call this morning with a guy, and by the time we got done, he knew exactly what he was going to do for his first step. And he had been thinking about doing this for 3 years and never taken any action at all on it.
Why is action so important?
Well, it's like a friend of mine told me, and this was like almost 6 months ago. He said, knowing isn't doing. And you can know a lot, you can learn a lot, and you can pursue knowledge of all sorts. But at some point, if you don't apply it, if you don't take action, if you don't, move forward by using what you know, you're never going to improve. You're never going to go in the direction you want to go in. So, a lot of times when people hear action, they get kind of hairs on the back of their neck. Oh my God, I got to do something. Well, okay. So you should really figure out with your coach or the person you're working with, your partner, figure out what that action looks like, but don't back away from that because that's the only way you move forward.
In the last 5 years, what new realization has helped you get better results for your clients?
Well, one of the mistakes that I made early on, and it actually was a consequence of this franchise that I bought into, because while I loved their philosophy and their approach, they were very hardwired in terms of what success and results and, all that kind of stuff should look like. And what I realized, after they left and I had to kind of go it on my own, was that not everybody wants the same thing. Sometimes business people and executives don't necessarily want extreme success or high levels of wealth. Sometimes what they're really looking for is somebody outside their organization that will just sit and listen to them. Because, they go through days and weeks and in their organizations, and they get this feeling that nobody is actually listening to what they're saying. They don't respond the same way. Sometimes they don't respond at all. They don't get their recommendations forward. So they walk around getting involved in a lot of stuff and feeling like there's nobody out there. So what I've realized a lot of times, and again, this is ongoing, learning on my part, is that sometimes the best result I can give my clients is just to really listen.
Why do you think nobody's listening to them?
Well, that's a deep philosophical question, but I think today we are barraged with messaging all over the place. It's coming out of our phones. It's coming out of our computers. Every place that we're dialed into, we are getting messages about things other people want us to do or buy or join or whatever the case may be. And I think over time, people, whether they know it or not, they just develop these really thick filters and they just tune people out. And sometimes people tune you out when the message they're getting from you is something they should be hearing because it's good for them, but the way it's being served up, they don't like it. So they just completely shut off. And I think a lot of leaders, and I've run into this a lot in the last probably 6 or 7 years, a lot of leaders, especially new ones, they let too much of their authority take over how they interact with people. And that tunes people out because nobody wants to be told what to do. People would like to be invited into the conversation so they can figure it out for themselves. But when you get people that just legislate and dictate all day long, they actually help train their folks to tune them out. And so that's what I think happens a lot of times. At some point, that leader wakes up and realizes nobody's really dialed into what they're saying. They're just showing up and shaking their heads like they're nodding in confirmation.
It seems like listening is 90% of your job. Now, are you also passing that along to the leaders that you're working with?
Yeah. Yes. In fact, one of the most favorite development programs that I have is called Are You Getting Your Message Across? And it goes into some research and some theory about what constitutes effective message transfer. Me speaking, you hearing, understanding, embracing it, owning it, doing something with it. And so I get a lot of people asking that, and they're always surprised when I tell them the number one skill on the list that you have to perfect to make the rest of the thing work, is you have to learn how to listen.
How does a person learn to listen when, most people are sitting around waiting for their chance to talk?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because while you're listening to somebody else, you're already formulating your response in your own head. So there's a bunch of little steps, but when you're going into an important interaction with somebody that works for you, an employee, maybe a client, maybe boss if you're not the owner of the company, it's really important to be aware of what you're about to walk into and clear the decks between your ears. Basically say, whatever's on my mind now, whether it be something at home, something personal, you got to put it aside and you got to practice it because practice is the only way to develop that. You practice that. When you go in, the next thing is figure out what you're naturally distracted to and figure out how to eliminate as much of that as possible. One of the biggest distractions everybody walks around with in their pocket is their cell phone. Turn the damn thing off. I mean, literally, turn it off. Don't be one of these people that, you say, oh, gee, you must be a real estate agent because every 5 minutes your phone's ringing and you're picking it up right in the middle of my conversation. Don't do that. Eliminate distractions. And once you've cleared the decks in your head, you've eliminated the distractions, the next thing is really just the verbal confirmation that when you're talking and trying to tell me something important, that my face confirms that I'm actually in attention. It's eye movement, it's head nodding, it's the occasional, yes, I understand. All that kind of stuff allows you to really get a real hardwired connection between you and the person in front of you. And if you practice it long enough and it becomes second nature, you will be amazed at how good the quality of your relationships will soar.
What area of your business would you like better results?
Well, one of the things I occasionally have clients tell me, usually at some point after we've been working for a while, or maybe after the engagement is over, they'll say, this was really wonderful. And I'll say, was there anything that you would recommend I do differently? And I get this comment more than anything, which is why I kind of thought about this. They always say, yeah, you didn't charge enough. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not the cheapest guy on the block. I mean, I'm not in the Marshall Goldsmith arena. I'm not charging $2,500 an hour, but I would consider myself a little on the premium side. So I'm thinking, okay, am I charging not enough? Or am I not bringing on huge value early enough into the interaction? So that's an area that I really need to really kind of dissect and look into because, on the one hand, I have had people say, you should be doubling your rates. And I'm thinking if I did that, nobody would call. Because if you don't understand how this process works and somebody says, oh, gee, it's going to be $800 an hour, all I'm going to hear is the phone clicking and a dial tone. So it's that combination of making sure that your value and your price match up and people have an understanding of the value when they walk into something they've never done before. And I haven't really figured out the answer to that yet.
What results are you most proud of?
On 3 different occasions, I have had clients who have come to me wanting to improve in their performance within their roles. They're director level, they're C-level folks, they've got some big chunk of the company they're responsible for. And on 3 different occasions, not only have they achieved what they came for, but within a 6-month period after that, they have been promoted to a higher level, which wasn't part of the deal. I mean, I don't put on my website, come work with me and I'll get you promoted. But when that happens, to me, that's just a confirmation that they've not only learned how to perform in their mind and in their head and their actions better, but they've done it well enough that it's revealing to everybody around them. And now people that own these organizations say, you know what, we need to have that person in a higher role where he can deliver even more value to us.
That's amazing. So are there any parting thoughts you'd like to share with the results leaders who are listening to us right now?
Yeah, and this is going to sound a little like, I don't know what you call it. Everybody says it, right? Be really, really clear about what it is you aspire to, what it is you want. Because I've been doing this a long time. I've loved every day that I've been involved in it. But what I've realized is that it is a journey. There's no real end to it. Because the minute you get to a place that you might have earmarked as something you wanted to achieve from a conversation 5 years ago, you know what you end up doing? You end up moving the goalposts. It's like, oh, I'm here. Well, gee, I could go there. And I'll give you an example. 2 years into my coaching, I worked with a guy who owned his own business and he was stuck at about $750,000, $800,000 a year. Year in, year out, he was going through this and he just couldn't. And it was really making him angry because it's like, I know I can do more. Why can't I get past this? So we worked on a couple of strategies, a lot of head work and a lot of strategy work. And within about 7 or 8 months, he passed the $1 million mark. And so I'm sitting there thinking, man, we need to throw a party. I mean, you just got through an obstacle you've been fighting for years. And the response I got just completely blew me away. Didn't even see it coming. He was mad. And I said, what are you mad about? You're looking at $1.1 million for the end of this year. He goes, I'm mad because I realized this wasn't as hard as I thought. I should have been doing this years ago. He goes, we're going to be going for $2 million now. And I thought, all right, so that's the way it works. The minute people hit what they've always wanted to get, now they're moving the goalpost because they're thinking I can do more.
That's the life, isn't it? That's the life of an achiever.
Yeah. So, if you're in the role of a coach or a consultant or somebody that's helping somebody else get there, just recognize there's no end to it. The only time that you get to an end is when you've mentally just checked out. And a lot of people do, they run a business 30 or 40 years, they just want out. So sell the business, enjoy your life, go off and do something else. But, just have some idea of what you're going to do next, because unless you're in fear of, expiring, you're going to have a lot of time on your hands. So you got to figure out what that next chapter looks like.
Steve, there's no doubt in my mind that our listeners will want to hear more from you. So where can they go?
Best place to go is to go to my website, which is growthsourcecoaching.com. Everything about me, I've got videos on there. I've got all the kind of stuff that will tell you exactly who I am and how I approach things with clients. And that's the best way for them to figure out if I'm somebody they should be talking to and figuring out if I can help.
Excellent. So I will make sure that there are links in the show description so you can get back to Steve. We've been talking with Steve Smith. Thank you so much. And thank you, Results Leaders, for tuning in. That is a wrap for another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. If you are out there getting results for your clients and you want to be featured on the show, go to ResultsLeader.fm now and apply to be on the show. And if you love what you're hearing, share the show, give us a rating and review, do anything to help us get the message out there. Thought leadership is easy, but results leadership is hard. We'll catch you on the next one.